The galactic Concordium station hung in the void like a crystalline spiderweb, its countless rings and chambers orbiting the ancient dwarf star that had served as the political heart of the galaxy for over 3 millennia. Ambassador Dorian Vex stood at the observation deck of humanity's modest diplomatic vessel, watching the station's mesmerizing dance of light and shadow. Behind him, his team of 5 specialists prepared for what would either be humanity's greatest diplomatic triumph or its final political gambit. They were not ordinary diplomats. Earth had learned long ago that in a galaxy filled with species that had evolved under different pressures, playing by conventional rules was a luxury humanity could not afford. The Apex Envoys, as they were known in classified Earth documents, were humans who had undergone extensive biological and psychological modification. Each wore a suit that was less clothing than it was a technological ecosystem, weaving together advanced materials, hidden weapons, and sensory enhancement systems that made them living weapons disguised as negotiators. Dorian himself was the pinnacle of human diplomatic evolution. At 42, he possessed the lean build of a predator, with eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of his surroundings simultaneously. His neural implants allowed him to process information at superhuman speeds, while his modified adrenal system could flood his body with performance-enhancing chemicals at will. Most importantly, his empathy centers had been carefully dampened, allowing him to make calculations that would paralyze a normal human conscience. "Sir," Rihia's voice cut through his contemplation. She was his closest advisor, the only member of his team whose modifications were primarily intellectual rather than predatory. Her role was to serve as his conscience, the last tether to humanity's moral foundations. "We're receiving the docking clearance. The Concordium Council has agreed to hear our petition for core influence status." Dorian turned, his gaze sweeping over his team. Dex Harrison lounged against a bulkhead, his casual posture hiding the fact that his pheromone glands could alter the emotional state of most galactic species within a 20-meter radius. Cassandra Vale sat cross-legged on the floor, her eyes closed as she reviewed cultural databases through her neural interface, preparing to infiltrate and understand every species they would encounter. Moria Song stood perfectly still, his modified sensory organs allowing him to read micro-expressions and body language with supernatural accuracy. And then there was Lucian Voss, their economic warfare specialist, whose ability to manipulate markets and resource flows had toppled 3 colonial governments. Dorian felt a slight unease as he looked at the man, though he couldn't identify its source. "Remember," Dorian addressed his team, "we are not here to make friends. We are here to secure humanity's survival. The Vexar Coalition has made it clear they consider us a threat to be eliminated. The Moravian Syndicate sees us as competition for resources. The Zonic conglomerate views our rapid expansion as an affront to the natural order. Every species in that station has a reason to want us gone." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "But they made one critical mistake. They invited us to play their game, and we are very, very good at games." The docking process took 3 hours, during which Dorian's team ran final equipment checks and reviewed intelligence reports. The Concordium's internal politics were a labyrinth of alliances, betrayals, and power plays that had evolved over centuries. Humanity was the newest player, and therefore the most vulnerable. As they walked through the station's gleaming corridors, Dorian noted how other species moved away from them. His team projected an aura of contained violence that transcended species barriers. It was not accidental. It was the result of decades of research into cross-species psychology and the weaponization of human evolutionary advantages. Their first meeting was with Council Secretary Zixon, a creature that resembled a cross between a jellyfish and a tree, its translucent body pulsing with bioluminescent communication patterns. Through his neural translator, Dorian listened to the formal welcome while simultaneously running threat assessments on every being in the room. The petition of the human species for core influence status has been received. Zixon's voice resonated through specialized speakers. However, concerns have been raised about your species' aggressive expansion and unorthodox diplomatic methods. Before Dorian could respond, the chamber's atmosphere shifted. A group of beings entered from the far entrance, their presence immediately commanding attention. At their head was Vextar Khan, the Vexar Coalition's primary representative, a creature that stood 3 meters tall and resembled a nightmare fusion of insect and machine. Secretary Zixon, Vextar's voice was like grinding metal. I must protest this proceeding. The humans are not diplomats seeking peaceful integration. They are predators who will consume everything in their path if given the opportunity. Dorian felt his modified adrenal system respond to the threat, flooding his system with chemicals that sharpened his focus and suppressed his fear response. He stepped forward, his movement fluid and confident. Representative Vextar, he said, his voice carrying just enough edge to suggest controlled danger. I find it interesting that you speak of predation. Tell me, how many species has the Vexar Coalition absorbed in the past century? How many worlds have been strip-mined to fuel your expansion? The chamber fell silent. Other species representatives exchanged glances, recognizing the verbal trap Dorian had set. By attacking humanity's nature, Vexatar had opened himself to the same criticism. That is entirely different, Vextar hissed. We follow established protocols. We respect the Concordium's laws. As do we, Dorian replied smoothly. We are here, after all, following the proper channels for membership consideration. Unless you're suggesting that the Concordium's own processes are flawed. It was a masterful deflection, and Dorian could see it landing among the other representatives. He was simultaneously defending humanity and subtly questioning the Concordium's competence, forcing them to either support humanity's right to petition or admit their own system was inadequate. The meeting concluded without resolution, but Dorian had achieved his primary objective, establishing humanity as a force that would not be easily dismissed or intimidated. As they left the chamber, Rehia fell into step beside him. That was well played, she said quietly. But you've also painted a target on our backs. Vextar won't let this go unanswered. Dorian nodded. I'm counting on it. Let him make the first overt move. It will reveal his true nature to the other species. That evening, as Dorian reviewed intelligence reports in his quarters, the attack came. A Texori assassin, one of the galaxy's most feared killers, materialized in his room like a living shadow. The creature moved with impossible speed, its blade arms extending toward Dorian's throat. But Dorian was no longer entirely human. His enhanced reflexes allowed him to twist away from the killing blow, his suit's defensive systems activating automatically. Energy barriers flared to life as micro-projectiles launched from hidden compartments in his clothing. The assassin found itself facing not a soft, diplomatic target, but a human weapon system designed for exactly this scenario. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. When it was over, the Texori lay dead on the floor, its body already beginning to dissolve according to its species' natural decay process. Dorian stood over the corpse, breathing heavily, his suit's systems slowly powering down. Sir? Rehia's voice came through his comm system. We detected the energy discharge. Are you? I'm fine, Dorian replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through his system. Send a security alert to the Concordium authorities. Let them know we were attacked by a Texori assassin. Make sure the report emphasizes that this was clearly a professional hit, not a random crime. Within hours, news of the assassination attempt had spread throughout the station. Dorian had calculated correctly. The Texori were known to work only for the highest bidders, and their presence implicated someone with significant resources and political connections. While no one could prove the Vexar coalition was responsible, the timing was too convenient to ignore. The Acrylian festival provided the perfect opportunity for Dorian's next move. This ancient celebration brought together representatives from dozens of species in a massive social gathering that lasted for 3 standard days. It was part cultural exchange, part political networking event, and part intelligence gathering operation. Dorian's team dispersed throughout the festival, each playing their assigned role. Dex moved through the crowds like a social catalyst, his pheromone emissions subtly influencing mood and creating favorable impressions of humanity. Cassandra immersed herself in cultural demonstrations, learning the nuances of alien customs while simultaneously identifying potential allies and threats. Morius positioned himself where he could observe the interactions between different species representatives, reading the subtext of galactic politics through body language and micro-expressions. Dorian himself became the center of attention at several key gatherings. His modified charisma, enhanced by subtle technological augmentation, drew beings to him like a gravitational field. He shared carefully chosen stories of human achievement and adaptability, each tale designed to inspire admiration while subtly highlighting humanity's potential value as an ally. The breakthrough came during a conversation with Yilatam, the representative of the hegemony of small worlds, a coalition of minor species that often found themselves caught between the major powers. "Your species fascinates me," Yila said, her crystalline features catching the festival lights. "You arrived so recently, yet you've already established yourselves across multiple sectors. How do you maintain unity across such distances?" Dorian leaned forward conspiratorially. "We learned early that survival requires adaptation. When faced with a challenge, we don't just overcome it. We evolve to make sure we never face that challenge again. It served us well in our expansion, and it could serve others well too." "Others?" Yila's interest was clearly piqued. "The galaxy is changing," Dorian said quietly. "The old powers are becoming stagnant, more concerned with maintaining their positions than with growth or innovation. Smaller species, like yours, are often caught in the crossfire of their political games. But what if there was an alternative? What if you had an ally that valued adaptation and mutual benefit over dominance?" He could see the idea taking root in her mind. The hegemony of small worlds had been marginalized by the major powers for decades, their resources exploited, and their voices ignored in Concordium decisions. The possibility of an alliance with a rising power like humanity was exactly what they needed. Similar conversations took place throughout the festival. Dorian identified species that were dissatisfied with the current power structure and planted seeds of possibility. He didn't make concrete offers or promises. That would come later, if at all. Instead, he simply made humanity appear to be the solution to problems these species hadn't even fully articulated yet. The Zero-G Gala marked the festival's climax, held in the station's massive botanical gardens, where artificial gravity was temporarily disabled. Beings floated among alien plants and flowers, creating a surreal tableau of interspecies mingling. Dorian moved through the 3-dimensional social space with the grace of someone born to it, engaging in conversations while simultaneously executing a complex psychological operation. His target was the network of rumors and suspicions that governed Concordium politics. Through carefully placed comments and strategic silences, he began to spread doubt about the Vexar coalition's true intentions. He suggested that the assassination attempt was merely the first step in a larger campaign to eliminate potential rivals. He hinted that other species might be next on the list if humanity was successfully eliminated. The beauty of the operation was its subtlety. Dorian never made direct accusations or provided false evidence. Instead, he simply encouraged beings to connect dots that were already there, to see patterns in events that they had previously considered unrelated. The Vexar Coalition's aggressive posturing toward humanity became evidence of a larger paranoia. Their recent military buildups appeared more sinister when viewed through the lens of potential future aggression. Cassandra played her part perfectly, spreading cultural analysis that painted the Vexar as fundamentally incompatible with the Concordium's stated values of cooperation and diversity. Dex's pheromone work ensured that these conversations took place in emotional contexts that made the ideas more likely to stick. Morius provided real-time feedback on how their targets were responding, allowing for minute adjustments in approach. By the end of the gala, the political landscape had shifted subtly but significantly. Several species that had been neutral on the human question were now openly sympathetic. Others had begun to view the Vexar coalition with new suspicion. Most importantly, the narrative had changed from "should humanity be admitted?" to "what are the Vexar coalition's true intentions?" The tribunal session was called 2 days later. This was the Concordium's formal mechanism for addressing serious accusations or disputes between species. Vextar Khan himself had demanded the session, claiming that humanity was using deceptive practices and psychological manipulation to undermine the Concordium's stability. The tribunal chamber was an imposing space designed to emphasize the gravity of the proceedings. Representatives from all major species arranged themselves in a complex three-dimensional seating pattern that reflected their relative political positions and relationships. At the center of the chamber, a neutral zone provided space for formal presentations and cross-examinations. Vextar opened with a blistering attack on humanity's methods. He presented evidence of human expansion patterns, military buildups, and what he characterized as predatory diplomatic practices. His presentation was thorough, well-researched, and absolutely devastating in its implications. Honored representatives, Vextar's voice echoed through the chamber. The humans are not seeking membership in our Concordium. They are seeking to conquer it from within. Their rapid expansion, their military preparedness, their manipulation of smaller species, all of this points to a species that views the galaxy as prey to be consumed. Dorian listened calmly, his enhanced neural processing allowing him to analyze every point while simultaneously preparing his response. When Vextar finished, Dorian rose with fluid grace and moved to the center of the chamber. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice carrying perfect conviction. "Representative Vextar has presented you with a collection of facts, but he has arranged them to tell a story that serves his purposes rather than the truth. Yes, humanity has expanded rapidly, because we were forced to by the hostile reception we received when we first reached the stars. Yes, we have military capabilities, because we were attacked within days of our first contact with galactic civilization. Yes, we have sought alliances with smaller species, because we believe in the Concordium's stated principle that all species deserve representation and protection." He paused, allowing his words to resonate. "But let me ask you this. When was the last time the Vexar Coalition expanded their borders? When was the last time they incorporated a new species into their territory? When was the last time they offered genuine partnership rather than absorption to a smaller neighbor?" The questions hung in the air like accusatory fingers. Dorian had turned Vextar's attack back on itself, using the same evidence to paint an entirely different picture. "The representative speaks of predation," Dorian continued, "but he defines it incorrectly. A predator takes what it needs to survive, and no more. It maintains the balance of its ecosystem. What the representative describes, systematic expansion, resource extraction, the elimination of potential rivals, that is not predation. That is parasitism." The chamber erupted in a buzz of conversation. Dorian had not only defended humanity, but had reframed the entire debate in terms that made the Vexar Coalition appear to be the true threat. Several representatives were nodding in agreement, while others looked thoughtful, rather than hostile. But Vextar was not finished. "The human speaks eloquently," he hissed, But words are just another weapon in their arsenal. They have infiltrated this very tribunal with their psychological manipulations, their pheromone emissions, their technological enhancements, their calculated performances. Nothing about them is genuine. This was the moment Dorian had been preparing for. Instead of denying the accusations, he embraced them. Representative Vextar is absolutely correct, he said, his voice carrying a note of pride rather than shame. We have used every advantage at our disposal. We have adapted ourselves to compete in a galaxy that made it clear from our first day that weakness meant extinction. We have embraced evolution as our fundamental strategy. He turned slowly, making eye contact with representatives throughout the chamber. But is that not exactly what the Concordium claims to value? Diversity? Innovation? The strength that comes from different approaches to survival? We are what we are because the galaxy made us this way, and we offer our strength not as conquerors, but as partners to any species wise enough to see the advantage of alliance with adaptability itself. The debate continued for hours, with representatives raising concerns about human expansion, technology, and intentions. Dorian fielded each question with practiced ease, his responses carefully calibrated to address specific species concerns, while reinforcing his central narrative. Humanity was not a threat to be feared, but a resource to be utilized, a species so adaptable that it could help solve problems other species couldn't even approach. As the session neared its end, Dorian noticed Rehia looking troubled. She had been unusually quiet throughout the proceedings, and he made a mental note to speak with her privately. But first, there was one more revelation to navigate. Lucian Voss had been absent from the tribunal session, claiming illness. But Morius had been monitoring communication channels, and what he had discovered sent a chill through the team. Lucian had been in contact with Vexar Coalition representatives, providing them with detailed intelligence about human capabilities and strategies. The confrontation took place in Lucian's quarters that evening. Dorian entered without ceremony, flanked by Dex and Morius. Lucian looked up from his datapad, his face showing neither surprise nor guilt. "I wondered when you'd figure it out," he said calmly. "Though I'm surprised it took this long." "Why?" Dorian asked simply. Lucian stood, moving to the window that looked out at the station's central hub. "Because you've lost sight of what we're supposed to be protecting. Look at us, Dorian. Look at what we've become. We're not human anymore. We're weapons that think we're diplomats. And you want to unleash us on the galaxy in the name of humanity's survival." "Humanity's survival is the only thing that matters," Dorian replied coldly. "No." Lucian shook his head. "Humanity's humanity is what matters. And we've sacrificed that for power. The Vexar Coalition may be xenophobic and aggressive, but at least they're honest about what they are. We're predators wearing the mask of civilization." Dorian felt something cold settle in his chest. Not anger, but calculation. Lucian had become a threat to the mission, and threats were to be eliminated. The realization that he felt no emotional conflict about this decision was perhaps the most damning evidence of Lucian's accusations. "You've already made your choice," Lucian observed, reading Dorian's expression with the skill of someone who had worked with him for years. "I can see it in your eyes. The old Dorian would have tried to convince me, would have appealed to my loyalty or my sense of duty. But you're not him anymore, are you?" "I'm what I need to be," Dorian replied. The confrontation ended with Lucian's expulsion from the team and his immediate deportation back to Earth under armed guard. Officially, he had suffered a psychological breakdown under the stress of deep space diplomacy. Unofficially, he had been neutralized before he could do further damage to humanity's interests. Rehia found Dorian in his quarters later that night, staring out at the stars. She sat beside him without speaking for several minutes, before finally breaking the silence. "He was right, you know," she said quietly. "About what we've become." Dorian nodded slowly. "Yes, he was. The question is whether it matters. Of course it matters, Rihia replied, with some heat. If we lose our humanity in the process of saving it, what exactly have we accomplished? We've survived, Dorian said simply. And survival is the prerequisite for everything else. Maybe future generations will find a way to reclaim what we've lost. But first, they need to exist. It was a cold calculus. But Dorian had long since made peace with it. The universe was not a place where good intentions and noble principles guaranteed success. It was a place where adaptation and strength determined who lived and who died. Humanity had chosen to live. The final vote was scheduled for the following day. Dorian spent the hours beforehand in final preparation, reviewing intelligence reports and coordinating with his remaining team members. The political situation was delicately balanced. They had enough support to pass the two-thirds threshold required for core influence status, but just barely. A single vote could make the difference between triumph and failure. The voting chamber was arranged differently from the tribunal space, with representatives seated in concentric circles around a central podium. Each species would cast their vote publicly, with their reasoning stated for the record. It was a process designed to encourage accountability and prevent secret deals. Though Dorian knew that the real negotiations had taken place in private conversations over the past weeks. Secretary Zixon called the session to order and invited Dorian to make a final statement before the voting began. Dorian rose and walked to the central podium, feeling the weight of thousands of eyes upon him. This was the moment everything had been building toward. He took a breath and began to speak. Honored representatives of the Galactic Concordium, his voice carried clearly through the chamber. We stand at a crossroads, not just for humanity, but for the galaxy itself. The universe is vast and dangerous, filled with challenges that no single species can face alone. Some of you fear us because we are different, because we have adapted ourselves to meet these challenges in ways that make you uncomfortable. He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the assembled representatives. But I ask you to consider this. If evolution is a crime, then every species in this chamber is guilty. We have all changed from what we once were. We have all adapted to survive. The only difference is that we have chosen to do so consciously, deliberately, with purpose and direction. His voice gained strength as he continued. You call us predators, and you are correct. But we are predators who have chosen to hunt problems rather than prey, to stalk solutions rather than victims. We offer our strength not as conquerors, but as partners. We offer our adaptability not as a threat, but as a tool for building a galaxy where all species can thrive. The chamber was completely silent now, every being focused on his words. The choice before you is simple, Dorian concluded. You can reject us out of fear and face an uncertain future with the same tools and methods that have served you for millennia. Or you can embrace us and discover what becomes possible when predators choose to protect rather than to consume. We are what we are because the galaxy made us this way. The question is, will you help us become what we could be? He returned to his seat as the voting began. One by one, representatives stood to announce their species' decision. The hegemony of small worlds voted in favor, as expected. The Crystalline Collective followed suit, swayed by arguments about the value of diversity. The Zonic Conglomerate voted against, citing concerns about human expansionism. As the votes were tallied, the margin remained razor-thin. It came down to the final few species, including several who had remained neutral throughout the debates. Dorian watched impassively as his fate was decided by beings whose thought processes he had studied and analyzed but could never fully understand. The Ethereal Collective's representative rose, their translucent form shimmering in the chamber's light. The Ethereal Collective votes in favor of granting core influence status to the human species. That was it. The two-thirds threshold had been reached. Humanity had won. The chamber erupted in a mixture of applause and protest. Secretary Zixon called for order while formally announcing the result. Dorian felt a surge of satisfaction. But it was a cold emotion, more like the completion of a complex calculation than a moment of triumph. As the session dissolved into smaller conversations and informal discussions, Rehia approached him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Congratulations," she said quietly. "You did it." "We did it," Dorian corrected. "All of us." "Yes," she agreed. "The question is, what exactly did we do?" Before he could respond, they were interrupted by an approach from an unexpected source. A being unlike any they had encountered before materialized near them, not walking or floating, but simply appearing as if stepping through an invisible doorway. "Ambassador Vex," the creature spoke, its voice seeming to come from the air itself, rather than from any visible mouth or vocal apparatus. "I represent interests that transcend the Concordium's authority. We have been observing your species' development with considerable interest." Dorian's enhanced senses immediately went on high alert. But he could detect no threat from the being. It seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time, making conventional threat assessment impossible. "Who are you?" he asked directly. "We are the observers," the creature replied. "We monitor the galaxy's political and evolutionary development, ensuring that promising species receive appropriate guidance at crucial moments. Your species has reached such a moment." It extended what might have been a hand, revealing a small obsidian token that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "This is an invitation. Your performance here has demonstrated that humanity possesses the adaptability and ruthlessness necessary for our purposes. We can offer your species opportunities that dwarf the Concordium's limited scope." Dorian stared at the token, understanding instinctively that accepting it would represent a fundamental choice about humanity's future. The observers clearly possessed power that made the Concordium look like children playing with toys. Aligning with them could secure humanity's position in the galaxy permanently. But it would also mean abandoning any pretense of equality or cooperation with other species. It would mean embracing the role of apex predator completely, without reservation or moral constraint. "I need time to consider this," Dorian said finally. The observer nodded, or performed some gesture that conveyed agreement. "Of course, but do not take too long. The galaxy is changing, and opportunities like this do not remain available indefinitely." The being faded from view as mysteriously as it had appeared, leaving only the obsidian token as evidence of the encounter. Rehia stared at the space where the observer had been. "Do you know what I think?" she said quietly. "What?" "I think we just discovered that we're not the apex predators after all. I think we just met something that makes us look like prey." Dorian pocketed the token without responding. The implications were staggering, but they would have to be processed later. For now, humanity had achieved its immediate goal. They had secured core influence status in the Galactic Concordium, ensuring their species' survival and political relevance. But as he looked around the chamber at the various species representatives, some celebrating, others plotting, all of them unaware of the conversation that had just taken place, Dorian realized that their victory might be smaller than he had thought. If the observers were real, if there were powers in the galaxy that considered the Concordium itself to be merely another group of prey animals, then humanity's achievement was just the first step in a much larger and more dangerous game. The thought should have disturbed him. The old Dorian, the one who had existed before the modifications and enhancements, would have been troubled by the moral implications of what they had discovered. But the new Dorian, the apex predator in a diplomat suit, felt only excitement. After all, if there were bigger predators out there, it just meant humanity would have to evolve again. And evolution, as he had told the Concordium, was what humans did best. As they prepared to leave the chamber, Rehia fell into step beside him one final time. "So what happens now?" she asked. Dorian smiled. And for the first time in months, it was a genuinely human expression. "Now, we find out what we're really capable of." The Galactic Concordium continued its ancient dance around the dwarf star, its countless beings pursuing their political games and personal ambitions, unaware that the newest member of their core influence council had just been offered membership in something far more exclusive and dangerous. Earth had sent its diplomats to the stars, and they had succeeded beyond all expectations. The only question was whether what returned to Earth would still be recognizably human, or something else entirely. Something that had learned to hunt among the stars themselves, adapting and evolving until the line between predator and prey became meaningless. In the end, perhaps that was humanity's greatest strength and greatest tragedy, their infinite capacity to become whatever survival required, regardless of the cost to their souls.